Now let's discuss Essay 230, that is audit documentation. Essay 230 on audit documentation. Audit documentation refers to the record of audit procedures performed, relevant audit evidence obtained, and conclusions the auditor reached. Objectives of the auditor. The objective of the auditor is to prepare documentation that provides a sufficient and appropriate record of the basis for the auditor's report and evidence that the audit was planned and performed in accordance with essays and applicable legal and regulatory requirements. Nature of audit documentation. Audit documentation provides evidence of the auditor's basis for a conclusion about the achievement of the overall objectives of the auditor and evidence that the audit was planned and performed in accordance with essays and applicable legal and regulatory requirements. Now, what is the purpose of audit documentation, or what are the benefits of audit documentation? The following are the purpose or benefits of the audit documentation: assisting the engagement team to plan and perform the audit, assisting members of the engagement team to direct and supervise the audit work and to discharge their review responsibilities, enabling the engagement team to be accountable for its work, retaining a record of matters for continuing significance to future audits, enabling the conduct of quality control reviews and inspections, and enabling the conduct of external inspections in accordance with applicable legal, regulatory, or other requirements. Now, form, content, and extent of audit documentation. The auditor shall prepare audit documentation that is sufficient to enable an experienced auditor having no previous connections with the audit to understand nature, timing, and extent of audit procedures performed, the results of the audit procedures performed and the audit evidence obtained, and the significant matters arising during the audit and the conclusions reached thereon, and significant professional judgments made in reaching those conclusions. Further, in documenting the nature, timing, and extent of audit procedures performed, the auditor shall record identifying characteristics of the specific items or matters tested, who performed the audit work and the date such work was completed, and who reviewed the audit work performed and the date and extent of such review. The auditor shall document discussion of significant matters with management, TCWG, and others, including the nature of the significant matters discussed and when and with whom the discussions took place. If the auditor identified information that is inconsistent with the auditor's final conclusions regarding a significant matter, the auditor shall document how the auditor addressed such inconsistency. The form, content, and extent of audit documentation depend on factors such as size and complexity of the entity, nature of the audit procedures to be performed, identified risk of material misstatement, the significance of audit evidence obtained, nature and extent of exceptions identified, the need to document a conclusion or the basis for a conclusion not readily determinable from the documentation of the work performed or audit evidence obtained, the audit methodologies and tools used. Now, what is audit file? Audit file may be defined as one or more folders and other storage media in physical or electronic form containing the records that comprise the audit documentation for a specific engagement. Now, assembly of final audit file. The auditor shall assemble the audit documentation in an audit file and complete the administrative process of assembling the final audit file on a timely basis after the date of auditor's report. SQC1, quality control for firms that perform audit and review of historical financial information and other assurance and related services, requires firm to establish policies and procedures for the timely completion of the assembly of audit files. An appropriate time limit within which to complete assembly of the audit file is ordinarily not more than 60 days after the date of auditor's report. The completion of the assembly of the final audit file after the date of auditor's report is an administrative process that does not involve the performance of new audit procedures or the drawing of new conclusions. Changes may, however, be made to the audit documentation during the assembly of process if they are administrative in nature. Examples of such changes include deleting or discarding superseded documentation, sorting, collating, or cross-referencing working papers, signing off on completion checklists relating to the file assembly process, documenting audit evidence that the auditor has obtained, discussed, and agreed with the relevant members of the engagement team before the date of the auditor's report. After the assembly of final audit file has been completed, the auditor shall not delete or discard the audit documentation of any nature before the end of its retention period. SQC1 requires firm to establish policies and procedures for retention of engagement documentation. The retention period for audit engagements ordinarily no shorter than 7 years from the date of auditor's report, or if later, the date of the groups of auditors report. Now, completion memorandum or audit documentation summary. Let's discuss. The auditor may consider it helpful to prepare and retain as part of audit documentation a summary, sometimes known as completion memorandum, that describes significant matters identified during the audit and how they were addressed. Such a summary may facilitate effective and efficient review and inspection of the audit documentation, particularly for large and complex audits. Further, the preparation of such summary may assist auditors' consideration of the significant matters. It may also help the auditor to consider whether there is any individual relevant essay objective that the auditor cannot achieve that would prevent the auditor from achieving the overall objectives of the auditor. Now, ownership of audit documentation. Standards on Quality Control 1 provides that unless otherwise specified by law or regulation, audit documentation is the property of the auditor. He may at his discretion make portion of or extract from audit documentation available to clients, provided that such disclosure does not undermine the validity of the work performed, or in the case of assurance engagement, the independence of the auditor of his person. In case of SA 600, there is no obligation on branch auditor to provide access to the working papers to its principal auditor. That is all about SA 2.